To be here tonight. Appreciate people being here. It's always good to have a good crowd. Our topic tonight is self-centered, and I know several of you know that I enjoy exercise, probably to a fault, to tell you the truth. But at 54, I finally decided that I need to probably stretch, and I've never been a fan of stretching. So probably for about the last month, I've been doing yoga, and I never thought that day would come, but I am doing that. Um, and one of the things I found, because I've never really done it as a whole, but one of the things I found that on these YouTube yoga programs that you can do, that they are always focused on self. That is a lot of their idea, and I know that a lot of comes from the Eastern way of thinking, that you can look within yourself to find yourself, and they talk about transcending and enlightenment. During some of these yoga practices, they call them. I just want to stretch. I just want to be guided through a stretching routine. But yeah, I thought, as I've done this, how dangerous to some extent this is to people that really don't know better. Now, to me, it is it's I don't want to say humorous, because that's a bad way to look at it, because it is both humorous and harmful, I think, in some ways. Because if you don't know better, you may say, maybe that is the way to find true happiness, and to figure things out, and finding yourself, and all these terms that people come up with. Um, but so because of that, I've decided to talk about self and self-centeredness this evening. In Philippians 2:3-4, it says, "Let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem others better than himself. Let each of you look out not only for his own interests, but also for the interests of others." So the idea, I think, is that we do look out for ourselves. There's no doubt about that. And I think, you know, you would be at fault if you did not take care of yourself. But we also have to think about the interests of others, and what is our purpose here as Christians. Is it solely for ourselves? It can't be. It can't be. So we need to actually look at other ideas and ways of helping others with our life, not just focusing just about ourselves. And in Philippians 2:12 it says, "Working out our own salvation." Well, working out our own salvation involves helping others also. It is not just working out my salvation. Um, so being self-centered is natural, and I think, to some extent, it's something that parents actually kind of train out of their children. If every child's first, thing that they learn, I think, is sharing. To some extent, they get around other kids, and they want the ball, or they want the toy, or they want the whatever, and parents have to teach them that, and they teach that idea of love and actually concern, sharing with other children, and how you should treat other people. And ideally, that process would continue from generation to generation. But that's not necessarily the norm in our society today. That process, I think, is to some extent broken. Many children don't get the training that they need. Whether it be by broken marriages, or children out of wedlock, or maybe even neglect by their parents. I've seen some children um, act badly because they could not get their parents' attention, because they had their head in their phone. That's the only way they could get attention from their parent. And that's a shame that a child has to act in a manner of that to get their mom or their dad's attention. And it's, to some extent, they end up lacking concern for others, and wearing solely just upon their needs. And to some extent, um, they focus on their self, and that's, I think, as a child, not knowing any better, it's almost a defense mechanism that they build into themselves. So they kind of go through their lives, thinking, well, it's all about me, and what do I have to do to, get something for me. That's that whole me mentality. So this is from Google AI. I've told you I've started using Google AI. If you Googled anything, you've used it, even by default. But self-centeredness, it says, the tendency to be excessively concerned with one's own needs and desires, and to ignore the needs of others. And I think that's a great definition. It also gave a sentence, and it said, "I am sorry your mom has cancer, but will you still be able to do blank for me?" And that is, to some extent, that is the ultimate. I know something's going on in your life, but what about me? Are you still going to be able to do blank for me? And our first record of this is actually found in Genesis 3:6. It says, so the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes, and the tree desirable to make one wise. She took of its fruit and ate. Eve thought that her own will was, self sufficient. At that point in time, she was, worried about self, worrying about she wanted to see something. She thought something she was missing out on something, and eating of that fruit was a way to find out something that God had been keeping from her, which it was not the case. So tonight in our outline, I guess you'll get it all at once. I didn't animate that one. But we're going to talk about the modern way, modern way of thinking about self-centeredness and the term of self. Then we're going to talk about idolatry. We're going to talk about the idea that being selfish hurts your relationship. Solely worrying about yourself will hurt your relationships. Also, the same thing with defeating self-respect. Because self-respect is a big part of our satisfaction in this life. And there's some ways that we can build that self-respect, and one of them definitely involves following what God has planned for us. God's will. You can have a lot of self-respect if you are faithful to God. And then we'll have the conclusion, and the lesson will be yours this evening. So one idea is humanism. Talking about a modern way of being self-centered. And that is a philosophy that emphasizes the value of human beings and their potential for self-realization. Many years ago, it has been many years ago. Trish had a friend who was talking about. She was talking about them to church, and they're like, I just go out in the woods and I just convene with nature. And that's, they thought that they could get closer to God by being with nature. And don't get me wrong, I love to be outside as much as the next person, but you're going to get closer to God here in this church building than you are out there by yourself doing your own thing, thinking you're going to, we just call it tree huggers, hugging that tree. That's the way you're going to find satisfaction. And that humanism rejects the idea of the supernatural and the importance of the belief in God. That humans acquired their capacities through evolution, and that man is the highest form. And obviously, that's number one, evolution. You have to realize that is a false theory, that could not have happened and did not happen. But the idea that you set up for yourself, that man is the highest form of evolution, that there is when there is a creator. You take all of the emphasis off of that creator and place it upon yourself. And then we had the me decade, and this is the decade of the 1970s. That was characterized by narcissism, self-indulgence, and a lack of social concern in many, especially those young folks. That me decade kind of followed that 60s decade of loving everything. It went from loving everything into everybody to me. It kind of changed abruptly. And then Looking Out for Number One was a bestseller by Robert Ringer in 1977. Where in that book he emphasizes, you better look to self, and you better look out for number one, and don't worry about other people. And this is what you need to get ahead. Funny, his first book was titled "Winning Through Intimidation." That was 1973, and I thought those are some great titles. First you're going to win by intimidating others, and now you're going to look out for number one. So that was kind of his strong suit as far as titles and books. And then there was a famous song in 1975. I don't know how famous it was. I listened to it. I didn't think it was that good, by Bachman Turner Overdrive, that was called, Looking Out for Number One was actually the name of the title. And one of the main choruses says, only way to the top is looking out for number one. That was kind of the mentality that was going on during that time. And the word self is used more than ever in conversation, talking about yourself and things of that nature. And I don't know how they came up with this, but it was 0.064 times per million words in 1900 and 0.095 per million words in 2010. So that is approximate 30% increase, over the years. It's still a weird number. I tried to kind of whittle that down to something that made sense, but I quit after a minute or so. They say we average about 7,000 words a day. So you can kind of do the math on 7,000 to a million, if you like, how many days. But regardless, the idea is that the word self is used 30% more now than it was in the 1900s. And then we had a popular magazine that is called Self. And, we all realize that society is self absorbed. Anybody who is on social media and any of those social medias, you'll see that people are, it's all about a picture of me and I did this or I created that. Or, you can kind of see it's me, me, me. Somebody look at me. It's kind of that idea. That idea of self-absorption is narcissism and self-glorification, vanity, arrogance and boasting, self-service, selfishness and greed, self-will is stubbornness, and self-obedience is lawlessness. And we all know that in Matthew 13 it says those that practice lawlessness will be cast into the furnace of fire. So we don't want to be part of that self-obedient type of mindset where we are just looking to ourselves for the answers. So regarding idolatry, and that definition is the worship of an idol or something other than God as if it were deity. And it can also mean having a very strong attachment or devotion to something. In Colossians 3:5, it says, therefore put to death your members which are on the earth, fornication, uncleanliness, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry. People focused on self-will will often substitute their will uh, for God's will. They're going to focus on those things, whether it be wealth or whether it be, sexual encounters or other evil things or theft or murder or, you know, whatever pops in their mind. They're going to put their will in front of God's will. They're going to put their will in front of the well being of others. They are going to totally focus on that one thing as opposed to the right thing. In Romans 1:22-25, it says, professing to be wise, they became fools and changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man, and birds and four-footed animals and creeping things. Therefore, God also gave them up to uncleanliness in the lusts of their hearts to dishonor their bodies among themselves, who exchanged the truth of God for the lie and worshiped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. Worshiping something, and not God. And we've got several religious neighbors that worship man-made things. They do. They pray to that idol or whatever. And I don't know how they get around the idea that that's not idolatry. That is because that is a thing. I was thinking about it. Everything made by man has an end. I don't care how well it's made, and how long you think it may last. But, everything made by man is going to have an end, whereas God had no beginning and has no end. And that's what these people were doing here. The glory of the incorruptible God. They made an image of it. That's the whole reason God doesn't want us to worship a thing. That's the whole reason we don't know what Christ looked like or what God looks like, because we would try to make something out of it and worship it, something that we made. But we can't do that. It's the whole purpose. And like I say, the wisdom of God is so far above, what we could possibly realize. Turning to self for salvation, may be the ultimate idolatry. Many people think they can save themselves by their own thinking. They come up with a great idea. I was having a discussion with my dad on the way home from church this morning, and I know several of you know that my dad's been coming, and we're really trying to convince him, to see, the truth. And I think he is listening because he is asking some questions here or there, which is fantastic. But we were having a conversation on the way home today, and we were talking about church and the truth, that there is a truth, and he said, yeah, well, all churches are different. And I said, churches are different. I agree. I said, but the truth isn't different. I said, there's one truth, and I found that not arguing with my dad is a better is a better choice. And he got quiet after that and changed the subject, which I'm gonna let him sit on that one, and we'll see what happens. But it is hard. It was the same thing when I came here. you know I was raised in the Baptist, in the Catholic, and in the no church religion. I was raised in several ideals, and it was hard to hear the truth. And I know it's hard for him to hear the truth because you don't want to hear that your parents or your friends or that your wife, who has recently passed, you know, wasn't a faithful Christian. You don't want to come to that conclusion, but it is a hard truth. Um, but um, but I'll continue to pray for him, and I hope y'all do too. That we can get to a place with him. And in Luke 12:25 and 26, it says, "And which of you by wearing can add 1 cubit to his stature? If you then are not able to do the least, why are you anxious for the rest?" I can't make myself taller or shorter. In the whole scope of things, wouldn't that be an easy thing if you could change something? Um, you know, you can't work out your own salvation based upon your ideas and your thoughts. You know, and in 1 Corinthians 1:18, it says, "The message of the cross is foolishness to those perishing." Those non-believers. They who don't believe in a higher power. Think that what we do is foolish. And I hate to say, when that time comes, it's going to be too late. You're going to bow now, or you're going to bow during that time. One or the other is going to happen. And best do it while you have the time to make some changes in your life. And Isaiah 55:8-9, it says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, nor my ways your ways, says the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." We're not equipped. We're not. And I'm going to tell you, some people think they are, think they're that smart. You can look at the whole Mormon religion and think that, and they believe a guy who thought he was that smart, he was going to come up with a better way. Hundreds of thousands of people following that religion. I don't know how many, I should look that up. But, following a man's idea, and he wasn't equipped, just like I'm not equipped. I'm equipped to do certain things. When I cut that limb and it fell on top of my house, I wasn't equipped, to make a good decision on cutting that limb down. That's a pretty easy decision, but I couldn't do it well. Working out your salvation, you better get it right. I could repair my house. I can't repair my soul if I lose it. I can't do that. So regarding self-hurting relationships, if I focus solely on myself, others suffer. Others suffer around you. And they say you can pick your friends, but you can't pick your family, and that is a truth. But sometimes your family gets hurt. If you just withdraw from them, there's no doubt about it, because family depend on one another, and the same thing with our Christian family and our church family. We depend on one another. We depend on another to be here. I was depending on you to be here tonight to encourage me to preach this evening. I appreciate it. I appreciate you showing up. And John 13:34-5, it says, "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you may also love one another. By this all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." The world only works when people act as God intended. I don't know if you've ever thought about that or not, but if people lived the way God intended, we would not be living in a world uh, the way it is set up right now. You just think you'd have a bunch of local churches. You wouldn't have, children that weren't cared for, or older folks that weren't cared for. That situation wouldn't exist. What a different world it would be in. And you could look at, just past society, but you could look at marriages. Those that marry for the wrong wrong reason, and they get divorced. They place no worth on that marriage relationship. Or their family. They have families, but they disregard them. Or they move away from them. Or think about just work. God intended for us to work. But you've got a lot of people that go to work and try to get out of work. But just think about the world, how it would be functioning this day and age if people followed what God wrote in his book. It would be a completely different world. A completely different world. How different it would be. And John 4:7-8, it says, "Beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God, and everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. He who does not love does not know God, for God is love." A lot of people only love themselves, and that's part of the problem. In Acts 20:35, it says, "I have shown you in every way by laboring like this that you must support the weak, and remember that the words of the Lord Jesus, he said, it is more blessed to give than to receive." That's ingrained in each one of us, to give. And doesn't it feel good when you do? I know some people don't want to give, but when you do, doesn't it feel good to be able to help somebody? And I would say that you have to actually work, to deny that naturally ingrained instinct. It's kind of like the instinct that you have to worship a higher power. People have to fight, to push that out of their mind. It's the same thing with helping others and giving to others. You know, it makes you feel good. You're called upon to do it. And I think we're all abundantly blessed, and we could give. And I'm going to tell you, I think it's the idea that it's yours. You know, what I have is mine. The only reason I have is because God gave it to me. I thank God every day for the job that I have. That He put me where I did, because I am abundantly blessed in my life. And I know He led me there. There's no doubt about it, that He led me where I am today. When that's denied, when you deny that, the fabric of society actually falls apart. And it's happening all around us today. That people aren't helping others and loving others. That's why we're where we're at. Just like I said earlier, think about what would happen in our world if people listened to God's word and followed His examples. It would be a completely different world. You can look at the marriage relationships and divorce rates. And I'll give you some good news, and I'm going to squash it. It has decreased. So this is the divorce rate. Has actually decreased from 4 out of 1,000 marriages to 2.4 out of 1,000 marriages. So the divorce rate has actually decreased. However, the marriage rate has decreased from 4.2 to 1 for 1,000 to 3.1 for 1,000. That's why they're shacking up. Just like, I think that's Ron's term, that we, not his term, but that he's used. That's what they're doing. They're just not getting married. That's why the divorce rate has fallen. They're just going to shack up, and if it doesn't work, they just break the lease, at their apartment, or sell the house, or whatever. They get out of that relationship. It'd be great if I said, "Oh, the divorce rate has decreased. It's fantastic." No, it hasn't. People just aren't getting married. That's the new way. They just want to live together. What a shame. And first I used at the beginning, let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind, let each other esteem others better than themselves. Let each one look out not only for his own interest, but also for the interest of others. That relationship, that marriage relationship, is that 50-50? No, it isn't. No, it's 100-100. People think marriage is going to be, fun times all the time. That is not the case. You have to be willing to give. Both of you have to be willing to give and give in. You just have to. That's how it works. And that's the only way it works, that you're both willing to give 100%. We are called upon to submit to others. That's what God intended. In Ephesians 5:21-22, it says, submitting to one another in fear of God. Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. In Hebrews 13:17, it says, obey those who rule over you and be submissive, for they watch out for your souls as those who must give account. Let them do so with joy and not with grief, for that would be unprofitable for you. That's what God intended, to submit to one another, help one another, look out for one another. How can I do that? And like I say, I'll be the first one to say I'm selfish with my time. There's no doubt about it. And I need to do better. And part of this lesson is because I need to do better. And then we have self defeats self-respect. So this is from a book or website called Rooted in Decency. And it says self-respect is an internal sense of our own worth that we create for ourselves. It can't be given to you by someone else, and it can't be taken away by them either. Self respect doesn't come from material things, beauty, or empty accomplishments. Self respect is about behavior. We build self respect by seeing the way we have treated ourselves and others in our life. And that's great. And we should all have a great deal of self respect. You know, we build that self-respect by doing for others, and we build that self-respect by doing good God's will. And both involve doing the right thing. We're supposed to treat our neighbors as ourselves, right? And we're supposed to do God's will, right? Both involve doing the right thing. And focusing on self just pulls you away from that accomplishment. I would probably argue that there are very few people that say they, or actually I would say there's a lot of people that are unfulfilled in this life, and they have no respect for themselves. They have no worth. They don't place any worth on themselves. You know, that person focused on finding themselves will likely do no credible acts that would actually build respect for themselves. They're saying, I got to work this out. You've heard that term, finding themselves. I got to find myself. That's why I'm stepping away from this, because I'm finding myself. But they're not going to help somebody. They're going to focus on themselves. And I'm going to tell you, helping somebody would actually build their self-respect and build them up, and it would make them satisfied. And that Me First generation, they started several things. One of them, exercise fads. I think yoga really kind of kicked off in the 70s. That was kind of one of those things. And then you have New Age spirituality, kind of the same thing, self-help programs and books. And there was an increase in therapists and therapy visits, in the 70s. All about that whole decade of finding self and me. I'm not happy. I've got to find me. They wanted to do all these things, and they thought all these things could help them be satisfied and find themselves. But they were just worried about themselves. They weren't worried about others. They may have had a great, yoga physique, but they weren't happy. They weren't helping anybody. They weren't happy with themselves. Today, modern psychology actually encourages us to think and to talk more about ourselves. What I need, and not actually what others need. It's exactly the worst thing you can do. Is to sit down and talk to someone, and in my extent, and you've got someone who's probably not a Christian as a therapist, and they're saying, what, you need to worry about you. If that marriage isn't fulfilling to you, you need to get out of it. If your family is not supportive of you, you need to step away from them. That's dangerous, very dangerous. People are getting their information from the wrong sources. And in James 2:17, says, thus by faith by itself it does not have works is dead, but someone will say, you have faith and I have works. Show me your faith without your works, and I will show you my faith by my works. As a Christian, we need to work for others. It's going to be noted. The more you do here is going to be noted, and it's only going to benefit you by helping others. Not sitting around trying to find yourself, but sitting around thinking about, what can I do for someone else? How can I help them? How can I teach them God's word? How can I help them find their salvation? How can I help them? We have to follow Christ's example in Matthew 20:26-28. It says, yet it shall not be so among you, but whoever desires to become great among you, let him be your servant, and whoever desires to be first among you, let him be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. We're called to serve, and we can't be self-absorbed in doing Christ's example. Christ wasn't absorbed in himself. He was worried about everybody else. He came here to save, teach. That was his purpose. And that needs to be our purpose too. The knowledge that we have, we should be sharing. It shouldn't just be knowledge in my brain. I need to be sharing it. And like I say, sometimes it doesn't go so well when you try to share God's word, but at least you tried. And that's what you're supposed to do. God will take care of the rest. You put it out there and God will take care of the rest. So in conclusion, in 2 Timothy 3:2-4, it says, for men will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, unloving, unforgiving, slanderers, without self-control, brutal, despisers of good, traitors, headstrong, haughty, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. We are in that time. You can go to that first one, lovers of themselves. You can only look at the massive growth of social media and realize that that is where we're at, and how evil it is a terrible thing. People are so absorbed in that part of their lives, hours and hours looking at stuff, and it's not helping them. It's not helping them. It's pulling them away. A time when many only focus on their current self and not looking to the big picture of salvation. They're just thinking about me at that point in time and what can I do to get ahead. When we only love ourselves, we turn our religion into idolatry. We focus on things that are in this world, things that are not righteous, but worldly. That is your religion, whether it be wealth or fornication or you name it. Alcohol, drugs, you name it. People worship all kinds of things. Our relationships with others suffer when we only focus on ourselves and don't think about them. And we detest ourselves, looking for happiness, rather than having self-respect, trying to find yourself, looking for that happiness that doesn't exist without God. It doesn't exist. And in Colossians 3:24, I don't think that's wrong. No. In Matthew 16:24, I should have changed that. Matthew 16:24 says, "Then Jesus said to his disciples, if anyone desires to come to me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me." Deny yourself. Deny what is that first thing that you love. Deny what you're drawn to that's going to pull you away from God. Deny it. You can do it, and you're the only person who can do it. I can't convince you to do it. I can try to help you, and so would anybody else in this room. But you have to deny yourself and think about others. I appreciate you listening. As always, the invitation is open. You don't want to take this time lightly. If there is something that is heavy on your heart, if there is someone that needs baptism, there's something, if we can pray with you, for you at this time, we ask that you don't hesitate. Don't wait another moment. Come forward while we stand and sing the song selected. I heard the